views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey everybody, it is a special edition of the Bronxbuzz. We are here the day after Election Day to talk about, guess what? The elections, and really very surprising results. We brought in a couple of ace journalists for you. As you know, we do a reporters roundtable every week with Bronx journalists to get an idea about what they're thinking about, what they're writing about, and give you a little background as to why they may have written something. To the moment, neither of the two who are sitting around the table have written anything yet because the election was just yesterday. But this was such a surprise, I think, for many people, certainly in the Bronx and in the city, and a sea change moment for our country, and maybe, of course, even for the Bronx, that we thought we would attack it right away and bring in, as I said, some great people. Erin Clark, Bronx reporter from New York One, nice to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Marlene Peralta, who's a media strategist from Progressive Cities, nice to have you back. Thank you for joining us. The election of Donald Trump as the next president, the 45th president of the United States, shocking for many, surprising for many. I guess we'll start with you, Erin. Why do you think that happened? How did we get to a point, I guess, twofold? One is that nobody really expected it, and then number two, that it actually happened.
Well, I think the polling just missed something, and missed something big. You know, no doubt there are a lot of people in the country, and maybe even some people here in New York City and maybe even in the Bronx that are just not happy about where the state of the economy is. And I think that there's definitely a group of people who voted for Trump because he's a businessman and they think, well, you know what? He's not a politician. He's not the same thing that we've had already. Let's try someone new, and let's try someone who is a businessman. Maybe he can fix the economy because he has that knowledge of how business works. So I think that that's partially where some of these votes came from.
Do you have a sense, and I realize, and again, it's very interesting for us in the Bronx because, listen, we have no Republicans in office, in elected office. You know, this is obviously a very left-leaning borough, maybe the most left-leaning county in the state of New York, if not beyond. Did you have a sense that there was just this immense dissatisfaction with not necessarily the politics, but the status quo? Politicians, time to bring in new people, and frankly, it reminds me of the election of Michael Bloomberg.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, we saw it in the Democratic primary with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders lit a fire under, or behind, I should say, so many people, especially people here in the Bronx who were just sick and tired of the status quo, who wanted somebody new, who wanted somebody who they felt like listened to them. And they felt like the current politicians that we have in office right now aren't listening to them. I was even listening to our station this morning, New York One, and the person that was being interviewed was referring to Staten Island, but he was saying, you know, Bernie Sanders was able to come in and galvanize such support because he was different, and that's the same exact reason why Donald Trump galvanized so much support, in his opinion, the person who was being interviewed, because he was different.
Marlene, same question for you, and then we're going to backtrack and we're going to break a lot of these things down. But the question is, why is it such a shock, and then why did it happen?
I think we knew that it was coming, but we just were in denial because around the masses that Donald Trump attracted from before was very surprising to everybody, and he was very popular. And like Erin said, you know, there is this movement of going against the status quo, and that's what he represented. Very drastic, you know, side of the business, but yes, a lot of people were, you know, whatever he said was resonating to a lot of people, and that's what's scary. Because again, like a woman like me, a woman, a person of color, an immigrant, I mean, he spoke against everything I represent, and clearly there's a lot of people who think like him.
Let's start with the media aspect of it. Both of you are in the media, I'm in the media. And what Erin addressed, and that was that the polling missed something. There's so much to read. I mean, you wake up in the
Yes.
morning. I mean, there's just not enough time to even go through it. And frankly, sometimes you just, I got it, enough. But I read something this morning that said the media saw the 30,000 people that showed up every place he went, but somehow denied the fact that that was real support. That it, frankly, much like Bernie Sanders, he outdid Hillary Clinton in the Bronx. He had huge rallies in the Bronx, and Hillary was not able to draw it. But the media then looked at it and said, well, you know what? It can't possibly be real. I mean, is there an element to that?
Yes, the media was doomed by the polls, right? They
Doomed by the polls.
Yes, and this is not the first time it happened, right? Like the media thought that people were not serious about Donald Trump, and look what happened. And I think maybe the polls did energize a lot more people to go in favor of Donald Trump. As they saw, well, if everything is pointing at Hillary, let's just go out and vote and try to, get this thing stopped.
So it cast him as a popular underdog.
Yes.
And so that helped to
Definitely.
motivate people. Of course, when I saw the polls along the way, I mean, and my own feeling was that I didn't believe that he could ultimately win. When I saw the polls, I always reminded myself, they're just polls. And if that's what it was, then why, we could have called the election 6 months ago. We didn't have to worry about polls. Here's the question I'm going to ask. I'll start with her, and I'm going to go to Erin next. There is this suggestion, and certainly if you analyze the vote, okay, and you go through, and I'm not talking about New York or Philadelphia or Washington D.C. or Detroit or Chicago or any of the big cities. I'm talking about Wisconsin and Michigan and Missouri and all the states in Middle America. There is a sense that whites who are working class people are, in essence, for want of a better term, a silent majority, and they were not counted and considered. And with all of the talk about Latinos coming out to vote and energizing Hillary Clinton's campaign, they were the ones that carried the day. I mean, do I have that right? That we media and America missed the boat on who those people are?
Yes, definitely. I mean, yes, I think the Democratic campaign tried to get the Latino vote and the black vote and forgot that there is a vast majority of white working class who were not even paid attention to, or they took it for granted. They took that population for granted and thought, oh, wait, let's just focus on minorities because they're the ones who are going to give us the rest of those votes we need. And what happened? Minorities gave technically those votes, but then that other population was completely for Trump. And minorities, in terms of Hispanics, we were not a whole lot more people go to vote this time.
Didn't add enough.
It was almost identical as 2012, and this is really shocking.
Yeah. Well, I also heard, again, so many numbers out there. I also heard a statistic that many of the Hispanics many are religious and conservative in nature, did go for Donald Trump. Erin, you covered the Bronx, so you're here, and like me, I'm in the Bronx all the time. Is it hard to understand the mentality that's going on out there that really was the mentality that drove Donald Trump to become the president?
I think for people who live in the Bronx, it most definitely is, because all throughout this election, we saw and heard from people in the Bronx, in New York City in general, who were afraid of the rhetoric from Donald Trump, who were afraid that if they were Hispanic, that they might not be welcomed. If they were Muslim, we know we have a large African and Muslim population growing here in the Bronx. If they were Muslim, that they would be surveilled in some way. People who are part of the LGBT group, they felt like their rights would be taken away. And so these people fought hard for Bernie Sanders. And then when Bernie Sanders wasn't there anymore, they still were not going to go for Trump at all. So here, when you hear that people who look like them, sound like them, are them in essence, are voting for Donald Trump, I think it's just baffling.
His background, and of course, I'm not in a position, either of you, in a position to verify charges that were out there, but clearly there are concerns about his relationships with women in the past, his certainly the language that he used, his general sense of morality. And I'm going to add in the fact that he has failed businesses. He claimed, I mean, he's rich, but he claims to be a successful businessman. He, at the same time, railed against sending jobs to China, but his ties and shirts all are made in China. None of that seemed to matter to all those people. What? Why? You're going to get it next, so she gets it first.
I can't claim this as my own thought. I read it in one of many articles that I was trying to read this morning when I was taking in all of this. But someone said something to the effect of many people thought that neither candidate was the greatest. There were a lot of people out there who didn't trust Hillary Clinton, a lot of people out there who didn't trust Donald Trump. But the article that I read, it struck me because it said that folks decided to go with the person they didn't trust, but told it to you in your face.
I see. So that it was obvious. Listen, you don't have to trust me. I was shocked, by the way. Don't go away. I'm going to get to you on that same question. But I was shocked that every single thing that came up, he turned around and said, well, she did it. He even said in a debate, she wants to build the wall. I'm like, wait a minute, I had never heard that. Every single thing, and people just bought it, and it didn't matter.
And that's a scary thing for somebody who is going to be running this country, to whenever someone puts the blame on them, they turn the blame to someone else. There's no accountability there, and that's a scary thing.
But again, going around, turning the tables, right? Like, she's a career politician, and he was convincing people around that. I'm no politician. She made decisions. She had 20 plus years, as a chance to change things, and she didn't. That was his rhetoric.
Although in her position as Secretary of State and as a New York State Senator, it's a heck of a charge to put on her to say, why didn't you change things?
Yes.
I mean, you can look at maybe her specific record, but to blame the entire economy.
True, but she's part of the status quo. She's part of the, of the machine. Then that's what people saw in her. She's part of these, establishment that we don't want, and that's what he spoke to.
I want to go back to that same question. So you travel in high-level circles, and you meet a man who commands some respect, and yet you find out in his background he has maybe harassed women or had made some statements that would make you uncomfortable if you were at a party with this person, or listen, we can't verify everything. And of course he right away says, I didn't do it, they're just lies. You not only would not go next to that person, you certainly, I'm making an assumption here, you certainly wouldn't vote for them to represent you in a position of responsibility. Why did those issues not resonate with women? Because they talked about women who did not have college educations as coming out overwhelmingly in favor of Donald Trump. Why does that not resonate with them?
I just don't comprehend. I mean, when I saw that number of like 42% of women voted for Donald Trump, I was just stunned. I couldn't even believe it. That why would women vote for him? And I guess maybe it's just in the past and people don't really feel identified with it. They were even questioning a lot of these women that came forward, accusing him of sexual assault and all kinds of matters, because 20 years later you don't have the right to come and say, oh, he did touch me. But and I guess maybe that resonated within a lot of people.
So then people were like, oh, he's being accused because
because the position he's trying to get. And that's exactly what brought women forward. This is the next president of the United States, and he touched me 20 years ago. This is my time to say that. And I guess a lot of people did not buy
They didn't buy
that.
it.
Yes.
Or they wanted so badly to believe that it was the political status quo that caused this problem, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a political agenda behind all of this.
We have many, many more questions to ask, and just so you know, normally the program's a half hour. We're going to do an hour today. We're going to bring on 2 guests after these folks are here. So don't go away. We don't necessarily have the big answers, but we're certainly going to talk a lot about it, and that's what the buzz is about. We'll be right back.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family?
This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything.
Oh, sorry. Go along, son!
it's always worth it.
Whoa! Master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Oh my God, go! Oh, Shane, look out!
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. 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 She keeps me warm.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Love is kind. Love is patient.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We're going through the elections. We're actually doing a special 1-hour program on the elections because obviously it's so important and really so surprising. I want to get into what we started to suggest and what Marlene suggested. We're here, by the way, with Marlene Peralta, who's a media strategist from Progressive Cities, Erin Clark from New York One, of course, the very popular and wonderful Bronx reporter on New York One. But Marlene, let's talk about Hillary and how much of the criticism of her was valid. How much of the email thing was really valid? I mean, they talked about Hillary for prison, and of course Trump, and he didn't confirm whether he was going to do this or not. But when he got into office, then he would start investigating her. What's your sense about those things as baggage and how much that played last night?
I mean, yeah, there were baggage, definitely, but I think it was overblown and to the end, almost to the end of the campaign, it was all viewed as, the FBI was playing political games here because of the pressure to prosecute her at some point because of the emails.
Yeah,
the suggestions, exactly. Yeah. So it did play a big role because that's what, the right was bringing up over and over, that she was a criminal and that she shouldn't even have the right to be a presidential candidate. So of course it had a big weight on her campaign.
Erin, why do you think her considerable qualifications, and many historians have said maybe the most qualified presidential candidate we've ever had, because she was a Secretary of State, a New York State Senator, had worked through her early years, she was a First Lady, of course, and worked on very important issues, healthcare and other things. Why do you think those didn't resonate enough to carry voters to say, you know what, let's just go with the person with experience, if nothing else?
Again, I know that I sound like I'm saying the same thing over and
broken
over
record.
again. I sound like a broken record here, but I think people just wanted someone who was different.
It's different.
Someone who was different. That's really all it boils down to.
Do you think her gender played? In other words, that there was some resentment about the fact that she was a woman? Or is a woman, obviously.
I don't think so. See, I think that there would have been more pushback about the country electing an African American president. And it seems that I don't want to say that that was easily done, that we elected and re-elected Barack Obama, but it seemed like he had, compared to Hillary Clinton, it was easier.
I disagree.
You disagree?
I disagree. I think the woman role here
Was
played
a big thing?
Was
In
a
middle
big thing.
America
Yes.
place.
Yes. I mean, again, you have the first black president. Now you won the first woman. People were not going to handle
gonna
it.
go for
Of
it.
course not. She had the track record, obviously, but I think just by the sense of having a woman in power was what alluded to all of these scandals and all of these baggage around.
You and I and others may agree or disagree about certain aspects of Barack Obama's performance. And we heard this from Donald Trump throughout the campaign, and I actually heard it from a sports talk show host on the radio this morning that I couldn't believe, that basically said that Barack Obama achieved nothing in 8 years. Now, any evaluation of his record, whether it be on social issues, whether it be even moving the needle slightly on climate change and the environment, would have to say something got done. Even the passage of Obamacare, which may not be universally loved, but has some value. Why is it simply an ethnic thing that this was a black president, and because he was a black president, white America was not going to accept anything that he did as positive?
Well, going back to neglecting the white working class, I think your point resonates to them, because again, if you look at the major policies that Obama pushed, it was kind of for minority groups, right? Like, the big thing on gay marriage, the big thing around immigration, even though he didn't get immigration reform, but he still got, DACA and DAPA for, students who came here as babies and were able to get permits to stay in the United States legally.
So in other words, he was still dealing with what Bronxites would see as our population, because we're so diverse, but you're saying that he was dealing with nuances of the population that same block of white non-collegiate voters would reject.
When you listen to people who are from Ohio and Pennsylvania talk, they say that immigrants are taking their jobs, and they say that the jobs are going overseas and no one's paying attention to us. We're the steel workers. We've been working in the factories for so long and now we have no jobs. So I agree with Marlene, because these people felt like under the Obama administration, they weren't paid attention to at all.
If you look at some of the things that he has said, we're going to build a wall, we're going to deport undocumented immigrants. I mean, just go on and on and on. You're going to get jobs. It's going to be great. Everybody's going to have a job. We're going to change the economy. What happens when he gets into office and he may not be able to get that wall built right away for any number of reasons? I mean, you're just not going to all of a sudden hire a construction crew and start building up this wall. The second thing is he's not going to be able to deport millions of people. I mean, 5 million people. The other countries don't want them. Imagine refugees from America. The concept is unbelievable. He's not going to be able to do that. Creating jobs, as anybody at every level of government knows, is not something you do overnight. What happens then if, let's put it this way, how big is his honeymoon? And will his supporters stick with him and believe? Will he be able to use rhetoric to convince them still? Good question. Do you have an answer for that?
He did a good job of convincing people so far that he can do these things that seem so large and so profound quickly and easily. I mean, he's a mastermind when it comes to talking and convincing people of things.
The job creation part is going to be the toughest part for him, because looking at Obama's record, and we just had come out of an economic crisis, and the country is doing a lot better than what we were doing back in 2008 or 2000.
But who benefited? Those people in that section of the country the perception is they believe they didn't benefit, that somebody else did, I guess.
Well, a lot of poor communities will say the same thing, but we have the lowest, the highest unemployment rate.
Right.
And we're not complaining about that now.
We pulled out some tweets. This was tweets from the Mexican president right afterwards. I can barely read it on my monitor, but they talked about Enrique Peña Nieto talked about mutual respect and all those kinds of things. Marlene, how do you read Donald Trump's visit to Mexico? Did that show you some ability to, at statesmanship? Because, or do you think it was just a campaign show?
It was just a campaign show. I mean, having Mexico pay for a wall, who's he kidding? They're gonna pay for it. That's kind of what his rhetoric was around. And after insulting Mexicans, I don't even understand why the Mexican president even accepted to have him, as a visitor after all of that.
Will he be able to break up families in the case of, let's say, somebody who was born here, a child who was born here, but the parents may be undocumented? Is he going to be able to send those people back?
Well, that's a very harsh reality. Let's not forget that under Obama, a lot of families were separated. And if that was the case under Donald Trump, it's going to be a lot easier. I'm hoping for the best, but the future is very grim.
Final words from you, Aaron Clark, about just what you think here. We always try to add something positive at the end, something that's less scary. Is there something that survives here that you're not concerned about? Just give me some conclusion here.
I think that it's reasonable to think that people, especially in the Bronx, are concerned and should be concerned about a Trump presidency. But if we're looking for a silver lining, if there is any silver lining at all, at his party early this morning, he did change his rhetoric a bit, and he called for being inclusive. He called for the country to work together. And that makes me wonder, Donald Trump is a reality TV star. It makes me wonder if, he appealed to these groups that seemed racist, that seemed misogynistic, just to get the vote.
To get it.
And now he's going to scale back. I wonder.
Marlene, we have so many wonderful friends and neighbors in the Bronx who speak Spanish, and we want to give you, because I do not speak Spanish real well. I do understand a lot of it because I'm a Bronx guy, and that's who we are and that's where we live. So we'll give you an opportunity to say whatever you want in Spanish.
Okay, I'm just gonna, ask people to go vote locally. Las elecciones locales para alcalde, para gobernador son nuestra esperanza, que cada estado de alguna manera tiene un poco de independencia porque tiene su propio gobierno, y ahí es que hay que ir a votar. Así es que para las próximas elecciones el año que viene salgan todos para ver si le podemos por lo menos alivianar un poco el impacto que estará dando la nueva presidencia de Donald Trump.
Gracias, Marlene Peralta. But really, Marlene Peralta, media strategist from Progressive Cities. Thank you. Aaron Clark, New York One's great Bronx reporter. Thank you. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back with one of the elected officials who supported Bernie Sanders, and we'll see how he feels this morning, as well as yet another Bronx reporter. So a special edition of the Bronx Buzz, the morning after, the day after, the night after the election, coming back right after this.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham-bam minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high-five.
Monday night at 9, we talk to the borough's movers and shakers about the latest in Bronx politics, education, healthcare, arts and culture, and literally any and everything that's important to the people of the Bronx. There's a reason why Bronxites have been turning to Bronx Talk for more than 20 years, because Bronx Talk is about you and me, the people of the Bronx. So we'll see you Monday night at 9.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. 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 She keeps me warm.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
All right, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We've switched places. It is my pleasure to welcome the editor of the Norwood News. It is David Cruz. Nice to have you back on the
Thank
Bronx
you.
Buzz. And really the first time we've ever really had a non-journalist. We just felt that in the scope of this dialogue, it was important to bring in somebody who had an interesting perspective on the entire election through the campaign. It is Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda. Nice to have you with us, Assemblyman.
Thank you.
Let's start with you, Assemblyman. You supported Bernie Sanders. You ultimately came around to support/endorse Hillary Clinton. Just give me your personal input into the campaign.
Well, I mean, look, back in February, there were certain metrics that I evaluated to determine who I was going to support. Aside from some of the social issues, some of the policy issues, I noticed certain things during the primaries that the voter turnout wasn't as great, the enthusiasm level wasn't as great, certainly as there was for Bernie Sanders and even Donald Trump. So throughout this entire process, I've been very concerned, and I noticed these red flags. Even as far as last night, I wasn't as comfortable as many people were, the media, about a Hillary victory. I just saw, again, certain metrics that I consider. Not that I'm a political genius, but
is there a number or numbers that you want to quote for us, or you just meant kind of in general?
Well, no, I mean, some of the swing states, those numbers I didn't think were credible. If you look at different polls, and I looked at all kinds of polls, so many polls, I saw that the numbers are inching up closer, that he was having a positive trend as we were closing in on election day.
And clearly, if I can interject, clearly the Democrats were aware of that because they ran into Michigan right at the tail end.
Oh, you see, and the other red flag for me was that the president got heavily involved in the last few days, more so than he did the rest of the campaign. So my thought process was, if the poll numbers are correct and the level of alleged comfort and victory margin was such that's being predicted in the polls, then why is X, Y, Z happening? And so that's why, when the polls closed, I was not convinced that Hillary was going to win the election.
Clearly, if that was the case, you may be the one in the Bronx that saw that coming. Why do you think she didn't energize? I mean, there were many people who were energized, certainly about the prospects of her first woman, about her experience. But I'm getting the sense that you didn't believe, and certainly the final numbers would show that she really energized a lot of America. Why was that, do you think?
I mean, Hillary Clinton's candidacy was a very complicated one. There's the history with the former president and her. If you look at certain different segments of society, there were issues out there that I thought they never really resolved. One of my big issues in supporting Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders was essentially the criminal justice issue was a big issue for me. And a lot of the trade agreements were a big issue for me. And the welfare reform bills were a big issue for me. And time and again, I know people say, look at the time, the snapshot of the time, but I believe that President Clinton caved into the Republican right and signed into law those two disastrous bills that even he has admitted led to the mass incarceration of Black and Latino men in this country. With the stroke of a pen, millions of Black and Latino children sank into poverty. And there was a segment of society that was learning about that. The Black Lives Matters movement, the millennials, the African American Latino millennials.
Given what you're saying is true, let's just assume that what you're saying is true. The people that elected Donald Trump were not people who cared about the issues that you're talking about. So I guess the follow-up question to that would be, would Bernie Sanders have had a different result? Because those people were not going to respect Hillary and they weren't going to respect Bernie either.
Well, look, I mean, so many issues here.
I know,
there'll be
there's
books
no real
written,
answers. I'm aware of that.
WikiLeaks is a problem, I believe. The Clinton Foundation was a problem. The issue of corruption.
But why wasn't the Trump Foundation a problem?
Well, because this was a change sort of election. That segment of society that elected Trump believed that Hillary Clinton was part of the establishment, and her election to some degree was a coronation rather than a fair process. Again, as WikiLeaks has demonstrated, the DNC essentially seemed to have favored Hillary Clinton and did everything possible for her to win the nomination. That segment of society, I think, would have come out in greater numbers in this election. Certainly the millennials would have come out in greater elections. I mean, time and again, when I would see these rallies, you wouldn't see that level of enthusiasm. And I think in the end, they didn't come out to vote, and that's why she lost it.
All right, we'll have more with you. David Cruz, just to get you into the conversation. So what do you think? I mean, what do you think this morning? Are you surprised, blown away? Does it now start to come together? Just in terms of surprise of what happened, that Donald Trump was elected president.
Well, yeah, I was actually glued to the TV, just flipping through, the channels, CNN, CBS 2, and of course just reading multiple news websites. And the buzzword that I kept seeing was the word repudiation, which essentially is a condemnation of the existing party, the Democratic Party, and also just establishment politics to begin with. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the folks who came out were essentially just looking for something fresh, and they found it in Donald Trump. And
all right, so now, given what you say is true, okay, people wanted something fresh. Mm-hmm. Okay, I want something fresh. Wouldn't somebody who doesn't have the kind of baggage that he had, who had consistency in his policies, whether you agree with them or not, has maybe a little bit of real experience in governing, who maybe is a constitutional historian and maybe disagrees with what some other people think, but at least somebody who has some kind of personal credibility, wouldn't that be a person who you'd gravitate to instead of a former talk show host who, hired undocumenteds to build his buildings, who had numerous failed buildings, who had a university that had lawsuits that is still going to have to be resolved? I mean, I'm just shocked, frankly, that people gravitate. Okay, you want to change, you don't want a career politician. That's the guy they chose?
Correct, because people didn't care about the
baggage. They didn't care.
But 2/3 of his supporters didn't think he was qualified. That's
what
the interesting
I'm suggesting is that he ran essentially on his character as just this entertainer and just very boisterous kind of a politician who framed himself as an outsider. And also, he was a good marketer. He essentially came up with a phrase that stuck with a lot of people.
Make America great again.
Exactly.
Great again, which, of course, was disputed by many people, but that's another issue. Dave, when you came in today, you asked me a question. I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to ask the Assemblyman the same question. Who benefits from this? Who is the person, or who are the people who are going to come away and say, good, Donald Trump is now my president, I'm going to do better in what realm? I mean, who benefits?
Well,
did you ask me because you
no,
wanted me to answer? I don't know the
well,
answer.
when I was hearing his victory speech, he was essentially saying that he wants to rebuild the infrastructure. So clearly, there's construction firms typically can benefit from something like that, and I always thought that was just essentially code for his way of trying to sort of sneak in that he wants to try and perhaps build a wall. That construction firms definitely would sort of pick up on that.
But you see, now we know, because and frankly, Assemblyman Sepulveda, we have talked about this, I'm sure, 1,000,000 times in the Bronx, that if you want to build the Bronx, construction jobs are good jobs and they're important jobs and there are union jobs, but those are, I don't believe, the kinds of jobs, and just using the Bronx as an example, that you can build an economy on, because they're all temporary jobs. You finish the roadway, they got to go find the next job, that kind of thing, as opposed to something more stable, more long-lasting. What do you have thoughts about that? And I'm going to ask you the same. You first, Dave, and then the Assembly.
Well, I do think that there is an infrastructure problem across the country.
No doubt.
To begin with, the roads are disastrous, and especially here. I'm always thinking locally for New York City. The roads. If you traveled on, say, the Deegan, if you traveled on the Bronx River Parkway, if you traveled on the 95, they are in really serious problems. And meantime, there's essentially just traffic congestion through the roof. And
all over the place.
And you essentially want to try and remedy those problems. It doesn't look like there was ever any kind of real infrastructure built
national effort toward it.
Exactly.
Okay. Your thought about who benefits?
Well, I mean, look, infrastructure jobs, even if they're temporary, they're jobs.
Right.
And if
you want to rebuild the Cross Bronx, I know that.
Absolutely, I could give jobs for the next 10 years from here. Anytime you talk about infrastructure, you talk about FDR. He got us out of the Depression, both through the Great Works, a lot of infrastructure money, and ultimately getting us in a war, or getting in a war. His speech just said it was conciliatory. I don't know what it means until he starts governing, because
there's no track record to go.
There's no track record, and governing is a lot different. Even if you have control of both parties, governing is a lot different than a campaign. Cuomo tends to like having a Republican Senate because he thinks it makes it easier for him to govern. But I think race is also an indication of how flawed Hillary Clinton was as a candidate. With all these terrible negatives that Donald Trump had, the racism, the xenophobia.
She was never able to capture the imagination, other than those who, felt strongly about her as a woman, and also about her work record.
Well, right? Yeah, I mean, so many negatives, so many things out there that I think most other candidates, progressive candidates, certainly Bernie Sanders, wouldn't have had this extra baggage. And I think at the end of the day, I believe, now sitting here, that Bernie Sanders would have easily defeated Donald Trump.
For want of a better term, trickle-down effect into the state legislature of the presidential race. What do you anticipate as you go back to Albany after the first of the year?
Well, I mean, the Senate remained Republican. The Assembly will always be Democrat, barring a major change in life, but certainly we'll see. I mean, Donald Trump is a New Yorker. Donald Trump likes infrastructure. He likes projects. So if, in fact, we can get another housing boom, we can start developing, maybe he can work with the mayor who's trying to build more affordable housing. Yeah, who knows?
Of course, now you have been a big supporter of Mayor Bill de Blasio, but certainly Trump has identified de Blasio as somebody who's been in the way of real progress.
Well, but that's, during the campaign, but ultimately you got to govern, and unless Trump is determined to be a one-term president, when you are elected and you want to be reelected, then you have to make certain alliances, certain concessions, and you can't be the bully that you were during the campaign. So he's, people talked about, one of the things, criticisms of Bernie Sanders was, well, how is he going to get anything done? We'll see how Donald Trump can get anything done.
Well, I want to, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll start with you, and we'll go to Dave Cruz, and that is the governing part of this. We're going to have to eventually get past the campaign. And you are in a district with with a huge Bangladeshi community and many Muslims, and I want to talk about, when we come back, exactly what your perception is of where they're at and what they're saying to you, et cetera, et cetera. So we're on the Buzz, special election results edition of the Bronx Buzz, and we'll do more with Dave Cruz of the Norwood News and Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda right after this.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
Oh my God, go!
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, she keeps me warm. 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 She keeps me warm.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Love is kind. Love is patient.
Welcome, everybody. We are open. I'm the Dr. Bob Lee from 107.5 WBLS. You can catch me on there each and every night right after the Quiet Storm. You can catch me right here on Open, 10 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. Let's just call it on the 10s and then just keep it tuned. And we got you covered like a blanket, okay? I'm out in the community and we're all over the place because we are now open.
It's the Bronx Buzz, and we are talking with Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda and David Cruz of the Norwood News about yesterday's election and election results. I really was thinking of you as the results came in because you have a district that is a large or contains a large Bangladeshi community, many Muslims in that community. What are they saying? Are they concerned? And then I guess ultimately what support would you or could you provide to ease fears of people who might be deported or who knows what?
Oh, they're very concerned. I mean, and rightfully so. When you had heard the rhetoric during the campaign, certainly any attempt to isolate or prevent them from coming in or something that I would fight till the end. I don't think any attempt to single out Muslims coming into this country would pass constitutional muster. I don't think we want in this country, and the Supreme Court doesn't want to have another Karematsu case like they did with the Japanese internment camps. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of it was rhetoric because you can't do most of it. The law won't permit it, the Constitution won't permit it, and that's what I tell my constituents, that we are a country
of laws,
and we have judicial review, thank God. And I don't think, no matter how conservative the court can possibly become, I don't think that we're going to be we're going to accept laws where you isolate a religious group. It just wouldn't look good internationally.
Well, of course, Donald Trump has his own perception on what would look good and what doesn't look good. I mean, again, it's so hard to measure what the equation will be between what he said during the campaign and you know what ultimately happened. You think he's going to get the wall built? You think he's going to be deporting millions of people, as he said? Or are you of a camp that says it's not quite that easy to do?
It's not that quite that easy. Who's going to pay for it? Because certainly the government of Mexico is not going to pay for it. And how do you deport individuals that, if we're going to be real and honest about, in some places, especially in some states, provide an economy, assist the economy, providing cheap labor? You know, you look at our produce. You know, you want to get rid of all these people, then are you willing to pay $10 for one apple? Because they're the individuals that keep prices down. It's impossible for you to go and import and deport that many people from this country. It would create, you know, it would hurt us so much internationally, our reputation as a democracy. It would be a disaster of monumental proportions, and I don't think he's even going to attempt to do it.
Dave, one of the things that has characterized Barack Obama's presidency is he has had to use various executive orders in order to get things done because he was obviously so viciously opposed in Congress. I made a short list of things. He foresaw deportation of the minor children of illegal immigrants. He mandated wage increases for government contractors, instituted rules regulating greenhouse emissions from power plants, applied the Family Medical Leave Act to same-sex couples. Donald Trump has said he's going to get in there and wipe them all clean, which executive orders he probably can do. I wonder, do you think he will then use the power of the executive order on the other hand? I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
I definitely thought that he will likely use executive power when he is sort of put up against a wall. And I think once he sees perhaps if the Republicans and Republicans in both houses are just going against his own agenda, then he will likely go ahead and use that card. And right now he has Congress. I mean, you know, it's now Republican controlled, so he will likely want to try and work with them in the beginning. And if things go south, he may very well use these executive orders, just like Obama had.
You mentioned Dreamers also, which is important by executive order. The Dreamers that are here, you know, I'm going to be making a request, a statement soon, asking Barack Obama to pardon all the Dreamers now, get it done now, so that they can remain in this country. Before Donald Trump, that's correct.
Yeah. You know, he really had talked divisively about, you know, deporting people and all those kinds of things. He also was singular in his campaign. The word that we are to understand, people, he didn't take advice. He had a lot of people around him, and all the way down the road, he said, I'm just going to do this my way. Yet, the Clintons and the Democrats had a huge ground game, and he ended up winning. Do you think, because clearly he has to admit to himself he doesn't have the experience or knowledge how to, you know, maneuver some of these things, do you think he's going to be more open-minded to listening to other people, or he's going to try to just blast through and say, look, I got myself elected this way, I'm going to continue this way?
Well, I think it would be foolish if he decides to go the route that he did within his campaign and just be brash and just sort of peg himself as like this independent, free thinker who just goes by his gut. I think he will definitely have a pool of advisors who will tell him this is the best route to take. If you don't take it, you may be voted out of office.
And so the question is, who are those advisors? Because if you look at traditional Republicans, I mean, whether it's, you know, Mitt Romney or the Bush family, I mean, they all abandoned him along the way. Even Paul Ryan, that is going to be a very big question.
Well, it's a surrogate.
He has said that the suggestion is Rudy Giuliani is going to become the Attorney General, and Newt Gingrich is going to become the Secretary of State.
Or they're thinking of Giuliani to be a Supreme Court justice and Chris Christie to be Attorney General.
Really? I hadn't heard that. I guess, I mean, there's just not enough time to...
Either then Newt Gingrich, a terrible option. So
and then Newt Gingrich as Secretary of State.
Yeah.
That's been the prevailing sentiment.
Assemblyman, do you have any thought on who might, you know, become real advisors to Trump? Are there people in government, or do you think he's really going to say to Paul Ryan and the Republican establishment, my party now, and you lay back? In other words, I guess the question I'm asking the wrong people because we need Republicans here. But how much is the Republican Party going to endorse this?
Well, I mean, as the president, the leader of the party now, he's going to want to put his imprint on the party. I'm sure he's going to change things around. He already has advisors. I mean, Rudy Giuliani's been an advisor. Chris Christie's been an advisor. And, Governor Pence, I think he's going to rely a lot on Pence in the next 4 years because Pence does have experience running governments, being a governor. He certainly has a political experience to make a difference there. It would be impossible, and as David said, ultra foolish for him not to seek the advice of people who understand foreign policy, where I think that's the biggest threat that we face, I think, is his foreign policy. And he's going to have to rely on a lot of people for advice on that.
Assemblyman, this is without a doubt the most Democratic county in the state of New York. It may be the most Democratic county just about anywhere in the country. People in the Bronx, and those are the people that I talk to, those are the people we're talking to right now. I'm going to use Bronx language. They're freaking out. Mm-hmm. They're saying, oh my goodness, this can't possibly have happened. We are now having a president who is reprehensible in so many ways. What is your message to even constituents who are, for want of a better term, freaking out, saying, my goodness, what do we do now? Do you have a message?
I mean, look, first of all, we all know that politics is very local, right? Everything here is
local.
That's
why I do what I do.
Yes. How it's going to impact us on a local level, it's hard to determine because we don't know what we're going to get with Donald Trump. We just don't know. He may be surprised. He may surprise all of us and be a little bit more centrist than we think he's going to be. But you have another election in 4 years. You have another election actually in 2 years for Congress, where you can vote in a Democratic Senate, where you can start buffering against Donald Trump for the next 4 years. I think that it's going to be a very difficult 2 years for Donald Trump, regardless of the fact that he has both parties. And at the end of the day, the Democrats will have an opportunity if they fix the process that we have with the DNC, if they start running, recruiting, pushing candidates that are younger, let's say, enthusiastic candidates that are going to bring people together and not have this party system that I think is too rigid and favors one candidate over another.
How worried are you for undocumented immigrants right now, or at this point, it's hard to tell?
It's hard to tell. Again, what you say in a campaign is different than governing, and when you're the president of this country, it's
not as easy.
It's not as easy. You don't want to do it.
David Cruz, last thing from you. Have you heard anything from constituents from your? I don't mean constituents from your readers. He's got constituents. You have readers, and the Norwood News.
Essentially, yeah. The prevailing sentiment is that everyone votes blue. You do have a segment within the Bronx that does vote Trump, and normally you would find them in the East Bronx.
Some in Riverdale as well.
Some in Riverdale. Sure. Definitely a lot within the East Bronx, and they're essentially just sort of stricken by the news.
We are going to continue the dialogue in the borough of the Bronx about this and, of course, all issues. And we thank David Cruz from the Norwood News, and we thank Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda for breaking his schedule and getting in here at the last minute. And we also thank Erin and Marlene, who are on the first half of our show. We're not going anywhere, no matter who the president is. So we'll be back next week. Thank you for joining us in The Buzz, and good night.